Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty. Very pleased to have you join us with our special guest today here on Finding Certainty. I have the unique opportunity to interview a guest today that I've known longer than any other guest I've ever had, specifically because he's my younger brother, Adam Laing. Adam, thanks for being here with us on the show today. I really appreciate you making the time.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. We've talked a little bit about this show and what you've been doing, and I'm excited to finally be here. So thank you.
Well, I will say this, Adam has been one of the toughest guests to nail down on Finding Certainty. I've been talking to him about being on here for a good year and a half. He's very busy, and yet it's always been a goal of mine to have him on. You know, I always start out the show by explaining a couple of reasons why I've invited this guest to be here, why I've invited Adam to be with us today. And it really comes down to two things. Number one, Adam is an expert on growing companies, on building their inherent value, their valuation, being able to build them up to a sell value or a buyout many times over what he started with. You know, all the verbiage, Adam, you can use the right vernacular, but he is an absolute expert. He's done it multiple times. He's in the middle of growing a company now, Healthcare Compliance Pros, HCP is called. He is the CEO of HCP. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how he's doing that, how he's done it over the years, how he's doing it currently. I think it's something that any entrepreneur or business owner or executive out there would love to learn. The second reason I wanted to talk with Adam is that he has a very interesting story, even from a young man to where he is today. A story of growth, of character, and of, I think, personal reflection and listening to mentors, listening to and learning from others. He's had some great mentors over the years, as I have. One of those being our father, John Laing. Our dad's birthday was yesterday. We're going to talk a little bit about him today. And so let's go ahead and just jump in. Adam, maybe tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you live. I mean, where you come from, a little bit about your growing up years, if you would, and then we'll get into what you do and how you're doing it.
That sounds great. First of all, happy birthday, belated birthday. We got to catch up with our father yesterday, which was fantastic. And so I love the fact that Patrick is the theme of this is to talk about, you know, where am I at? How did I get here? And where am I going to, as far as having our father as a part of that organic picture certainly has influenced both my life and I know Patrick's. And the topic of mentors is always a really great topic for me, because I certainly wouldn't be here if there weren't so many individuals that have influenced my life, not only professionally, but personally, all the way along the path to where I'm at today. And Patrick's one of those. So I get to turn this around a little bit and say that I wouldn't be here today at Healthcare Compliance Pros if it wasn't for the influence and mentorship that I've received from Patrick. Back in the day, my early getting right out of college, I had planned on being some middle management executive from a technical side. I was in MIS coming through college, and that was, funny enough, that's where I kind of put my goals and objectives, somewhere in middle management at IBM. I was working with them and I had a chance at a very young age to work at a number of Fortune 200 companies. And that was my aspirations at the time. And had a couple of experiences through the economy that had some setbacks. I look at 2001 and 2008. Those years have really impacted my life. And I think we can get into that. How did I get to where I'm at today? But Patrick was a big role in that, as far as from a sales and marketing standpoint. Patrick's always been involved in building business from that standpoint, and I wanted nothing to do with it. In fact, I thought I just want to be on the technical side of technology. That's where I want to be. I want to manage resources, manage technology, and so I think we'll get to that later on. But I just wanted to say thanks to Patrick in that perspective, that I wouldn't be here where I'm at today if it wasn't for his guidance and mentorship early on in my career. And then focusing back to my own father, Patrick and I grew up in
Adam,
a
let me
home.
Adam, let me just interject real quick
Yeah,
before we
yeah.
go there. I want to I want to shed a little bit more light on what you were just talking about, because I think it's kind of the foundation of where you are today. The fact that I helped it all in any way is irrelevant, but it's kind of a funny part of the story, if I may, because Adam he had interned with IBM 3 years in a row. He had a job offer. He and his wife and their little girl, they were ready to go to Maryland, right? Wasn't it to
Yep.
Maryland to go to work? And 2 weeks before he graduates, he finds out that they've gone on a hiring freeze. So he called me in a panic. What do I do, Patrick? He goes, I lose my housing in 2 weeks. I've lost my job that I thought I had. I've been working for these last several years. What do I do? And I said, well, come on up and just stay with me. I was in Anchorage, Alaska at the time. I said, you can have my master bedroom. I'll stay in the guest room, and let's see if we can find you a job. Well, long story short, we did get him a job in sales, and he was terrible. I don't think
Well,
he
let's
could give it
back up.
away.
Let's back up a moment there, because this Patrick and I, certainly we haven't talked about this in probably 18 years or 20 years. But so the one thing that I want to mention is this is 2001 .com explosion, right?
Right.
I had turned down numerous jobs in the technology area to go with IBM, and then, just as Patrick had mentioned, I'm on my way out to Alaska, and this is coming from Hawaii. So coming from Hawaii to Alaska seemed like the worst thing in the world to me. But Patrick had mentioned, and this held true, that the Alaska had not been hit as hard as the lower 48. And so when I went up there, I literally got a job at a little tech company and was making something like whatever minimum wage was. I was making $1 more than minimum wage. And I was providing technical support for these little startup businesses, and it wasn't a happy moment in from where I thought I was going to be, when I was working at IBM. Now, as I'm doing this for about a month and a half, just grinding, trying to figure out what I'm going to do, Patrick's making my salary every month doing sales. And he'd come home with a big smile on his face, tell me he loves his job. And I just said, okay, we need to talk about what you're doing and about what I'm doing, because you seem very happy. You're making 10 times the amount that I'm making, and I'm grinding every day at this. And so that's where the one thing I did want to mention to Patrick is that was the big thing for me. Is I thought, hey, a salary, a 401k, at the time when there was such things as pensions, that's where I was, I was focused on. And then here's Patrick making my annual wages every month or so. And so I said, okay, maybe I need to think about what you're doing.
Well, I do believe in divine choreography. I believe the Lord guides us in paths that maybe we didn't expect or didn't foresee. And one day, Adam came to work with me, and our regional manager happened to be there that day, Mr. Rich Folk. And he said, and he visited with Adam, and Adam's very charismatic. He hit it right off with Rich, and Rich pulled me aside. He said, your brother's sharp. He said, think he'd want to come to work for us? I said, well, I don't think he wants to go into sales, but I think he'd be good, but I really don't know that he's interested. Don't know that he'd be interested. He said, well, let's talk to him about it, because I think he'd be fantastic. Well, long story short, they did not have room for him in Anchorage. but he called down and talked to the project director in Vancouver, Washington. And that PD, Sir Dennis Burback, who I've been friends with ever since, he said, well, I actually have 2 positions. He said, if Patrick would come with him, I'd be open to hiring Adam. And I said immediately, let's go. My project director wasn't happy about that. I was his top rep, but he said, I understand. And I needed to get out of Anchorage anyway. I'd gone through a divorce. It was time for me to have a change of scenery. And I really did believe that Adam could be great at sales. I believed that he could do well. Well, long story short, we went to Vancouver and he couldn't give it away. We were selling a vacation ownership package. He just struggled. I think you sold 1 deal in 2 or 3 months you were there. And
So
yet,
actually,
go on,
funny enough,
tell the story.
I had at the time it was around Christmas, and I was living off of these cash spiff bonuses because I would get a number of deals. I really think it was people that just felt sorry for me. You know, I'm right out of college and just starting this. So I was putting food in the cupboard at the time because of these spiff bonuses. But there was this what do you call it? The period of time that you can
The grace period. Yeah.
the grace period, everybody would come back and they would, that 7-day period and drop the deal. And so my retention was terrible. So here I am. I thought I was making great rapport. What I found out, 2 things was there wasn't a better sales learning environment for anybody. For me, it was, I remember it was like Tommy Hopkins, boot camp sales. There was just a number of things, and I'm trying to learn the processes, the techniques of closing, how to really relate and build that rapport for the first time in my life, really in this kind of context. Patrick, you're right. I was not doing well at all, and I'm just stressed because you had moved down to, moved your residence, sold your house, and here I am, really not doing well a couple of months into this. And you had kind of mentioned divine choreography. That's like that's verbiage that we use and have used, and I think we'll talk more about it. But I'm in that area, and I happen to meet through our church a guy that was looking to hire in the technology space, basically a small software company looking for some sales reps. He was a new director of sales and marketing. They had just been acquired by a Fortune 200 company, small little local company in Portland, Oregon. And that changed the entire trajectory. I was able to say I have 2 months of sales experience, but my background in technology is really the reason why that made it. So it was interesting. That got me started off on to where I'm at today.
Well, and that's why I believe it was serendipitous or inspired, because if you hadn't had any sales experience, they maybe wouldn't have hired you. And that set you on a trajectory into technical sales where you flourished and you just soared. I mean, you became their number 1 rep and went on into management and went on to doing what you now do, where you learned the basics, and then you've built on that. You've started to teach others how to do it. You've taught whole companies how to do it. I mean, it's been inspiring. I joke that you were terrible when you started, but it was only because I think you needed to find your lane. And that's something a lot of salespeople, a lot of entrepreneurs need to do. They need to find their lane. And it's oftentimes after a lot of trial and error or a lot of failure. I always say, just keep failing forward, and eventually you'll get there. We're coming up on our first break. I'm telling you, this show goes by really fast, Adam. So let's talk just briefly before the break. When you hit the ground running at your new employer, you left Trend West, you went to the software company. How was it different? I mean, what was it about that you suddenly just took flight?
Yeah, like I had mentioned, that 2 months, maybe it was 2.5, I can't remember. I try to shut it out of my mind. But no, kidding aside, it really was. I think you said it perfectly. Finding your lane. So I was very comfortable in the technology world, and technology, as you think about it, just as in business, it's a language of its own. And what's difficult is when you find a programmer or a developer, an engineer, and you try to put them in front of a prospect or in front of a customer, even, it can be difficult because there's a reason why zeros and ones make sense to some people and why it makes sense for others to be really on the communication side. Well, it turns out, and we'll get back to this with Patrick and my father. We grew up in a very communicative household, you know, from writers, from educators, both of our parents, and so I grew up with the gift of gab, if you will, but I just never thought of wanting to do that for a living. So when I got in the place of technology, I could explain and talk to technology like no other. And so it was a natural fit. And when Patrick, you say it's a matter of finding your lane, that's where the two worlds of technology, understanding the background, the language of it, and then being able to present a value-based opportunity for somebody, for me, made all the difference in the world. And that's where I felt at home. And that's really the starting of, you know, my career in technology.
100%. I completely agree. I believe it's very rare even to find someone that can fill both of those roles. You usually have a salesperson and an engineer in the room. But if you can be both of those, if you can speak to both the engineer or the technical side, the IT director, or you can speak to the CEO, the CFO, the COO, et cetera, all at the same time, that's a talent that will take you far in sales. It is challenging to find, but if you have that expertise or you can gain it, you can do well. We are up against our first break. We're visiting with Adam Laing. He's the CEO of Healthcare Compliance Pros. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
All right, perfect, guys. All clear. Back in about 2.
Thanks, man. So I always start these shows out and I have no idea where they're going to go. I don't like to, you know, Frank, my business partner, he always does a 30-minute meeting with his guests before the show, like that the week before, and they plan out what they're going to talk about and stuff. I don't do that. I follow another model, I guess. Our friend Inan de Rosa, she refuses to talk to someone before they start rolling.
Really?
Because she wants it to be off the cuff and comfortable and natural, and she doesn't want it canned, you know. The first couple of shows I did, first 2 or 3 shows I did, I actually wrote it all out and planned out my questions and everything, and I had them on the page, and I was following along, and then one day I didn't have time to do that before the show, and it was the best show I'd had. Just ever since then, one, it saves me a lot of time, but 2, it just feels like they go really naturally. Kind of, I go where I'm guided and where the conversation takes us, and it's fun. So I didn't even know we were going to go there, but that was good.
I didn't either.
It's a good backdrop, right? Backstory.
Yeah, I think so.
I think a lot of people have similar experiences where they sucked when they started and they get better. I did, you know. I should tell the story about how I came down to Vancouver and sold my first deal and then said just loud enough that everybody could hear, wow, that was easy. And then I blinked for the next 6 weeks.
Is that right?
Yeah. You were struggling, I was struggling. They were all thinking, I'm sure Dennis was thinking, yeah, what's up with these Laing boys? I thought they were going to kill it, and they both are terrible.
That's funny. That's funny.
That was a compelling lesson for me on being humble and not trying to say, you know, look at me. But
yeah.
So what do you think about the beard?
I like it. I think it's a good look.
Betrays my age. My baby face is betrayed by the white whiskers, but
I think it's a good look. I don't know if I've ever seen you with a beard before.
I think this is the fullest one I've ever grown. And it's so light, it takes a while to start showing up.
1 second, guys.
All right. Thanks, man.
You're listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back to Finding Certainty. I'm visiting with my younger brother, Adam Laing, today. He's the CEO of Healthcare Compliance Pros, otherwise known as HCP. We've been talking a little bit about Adam's backstory, how he got started in sales, and like many of us, maybe struggle a little bit at first until we find our stride or find our lane, as we were saying. I think you hit the nail on the head, Adam, when you talk about really being able to combine your technical expertise and your understanding of the industry with your gift of gab, as you said. I mean, we grew up in a family, as you mentioned, where our mom was an English professor, our dad was an editor and an administrator, and came from a long line of educators, actually, our uncle, our grandmother, et cetera, et cetera. And so language was always a forte for us. In fact, we had a Christmas talent show at our church last month, and I got up and said, my talent is speech. I said, everything I do is about speech. I'm in sales. I'm a writer, a speaker, a radio host. And so I actually did a monologue. I read a monologue about from the movie Scrooged. And it was good. But I've always felt like it was a talent of mine. I've always felt like it was a talent of yours. And so I was so happy to see when you found that lane, you got into technical sales, and you started to excel and just do so well. What I have never really understood is how you transitioned from there into running entire teams and changing entire companies, which you have done. HCP, which is in Logan, Utah now, you're doing record sales. The last company you were with, you did record sales, increased their valuation exponentially. But how did you make that leap? How did you go from being a top salesperson to being a game changer for companies?
Well, in this conversation, I'd kind of alluded to 2001 and 2008, really being recession. It's not hard for anybody to remember that's lived through that time, the dot-com explosion in 2000, 2001, which is when I graduated and everything happened with my internship at IBM. Prior to IBM, I worked at a very large company called Novell, which is a big software company, at that time. And so that was the feeding of the spoon. That was my upbringing into these large technology-driven Fortune 500 type companies. Well, then fast forward into, getting the sales experience and then moving into technical sales. Finding my lane, I had found great success. Well, what would happen? I had actually thought, man, I'm learning for the first time what it means to earn your value versus earning a salary and looking at bonuses. And I was hooked. I couldn't imagine ever doing anything other than earning what I can bring to the table. Well, that created, in growing up with the backdrop of entrepreneurial parents, and even yourself being an entrepreneur, I thought, this is going great. I can do even better if I create my own business. And I remember having those hard conversations with my wife, and she's saying at the time, you're making great money. Our family is really blessed. Why in the world would you think about this? And I really thought, this is a great time for me to go out into the world and continue to build my own value. Well, I started a little software company, an introducing brokerage firm, for about 4 to 5 years that had just skyrocketed. And I thought we were done, thought we'd made it. Creating software for commodities and futures, when to buy, when to sell. And then, 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears, then seeing, the horizon of great success. 2008 hits, and everything to do with the landscape of futures, commodities, the stock market just crashed. I look at those 4 years, 5 years, and that ultimately came down to my wife saying, hey, maybe it's time for you to grow up and get a real job. in 2008, 2009, when we're trying to make it through that period, And it made me reassess and look at where I was at. And it did two things for me. I call it my MBA because number one, I learned really what it means to earn your own value, living paycheck to paycheck on what you do. But secondly, when looking at that role and bringing these things together is, how do I look at my own business? So when I was going to look at getting hired by somebody else, I thought, who am I going to work for? How do I still create my own business and create a value and yet work for somebody else? And I was so grateful. I ended up through introduction from my parents actually meeting with a CFO at a small software company in Logan, Utah, which made me move. But a $5 million software company that the owners there were so great with me, entrepreneurial minded. We're in a great place as far as trying to find growth themselves. And I just found that being an entrepreneur, whether you're working for somebody or not, is so critical to find success. When you look at invest yourself with that business and you look at creating your own business within it, even if you're an employee, because I just done 4 to 5 years of, if I did something, I made money. If I didn't do something or something else happened, I didn't make money. Having that reality and then going to work for somebody else, but taking that with me and finding the right situation set me on fire for helping other groups to grow their companies.
It's a really good point, Adam. You know how I was the sales director for LeafGuard Northwest in Portland for several years. And what changed that company more than anything else was we helped incorporate an ownership mindset in our employees. We taught them accountability through what's called the Oz principle. We taught them execution through what's called the 4 disciplines of execution from the Covey Leadership Group. But really incorporating that ownership mindset. We gave awards for it. We recognized it. We constantly talked about it. Because even as an employee, if you can view it as though you're the owner, as though every decision affects the bottom line and affects the future of the company, the stability of the company. We took that branch from about 3.5 million a year to 7.5 million to 16 million to 20 million. I mean, we became number one out of the entire country out of 65 offices. And I attribute that, the point you just made, to all of our success.
Absolutely. I think it is so critical that even as I hire still today, I'm looking for that in somebody. How do you feel about coming in and building your business? I oftentimes when I'm hiring in sales, I would say, here's the opportunity for you. Yes, you get a base salary and there's some benefits, but that's just a part of the benefit for building your business with us. I was looking for those kind of attributes, somebody that's looking to do that, not just looking to, get a wage and then how can I go and work for you? So I've always been looking for that. I was also very lucky. I worked with a guy named Frank Felice, who was one of the owners. And I remember, and he could see this in me. They didn't have a sales position available when I was looking. And so I ended up in project management for a very short stint of time. And I looked at that as a sales job. I was really successful in doing project management, which at the time I knew very little bit about, but they knew I could speak technology. And so my projects went really well because I was able to use the same sales techniques, closing principles when I'm working with clients to move projects along. And that they saw that in me really quickly. Frank Felice, one of the owners, ended up putting me into the sales engineering position because then I could be the go-between between the sales folks, project managers. He quickly moved me from there into sales. Eventually, I was the director of sales and marketing. But this conversation to me was the epitome of Frank's perspective. And I remember when I first moved over onto the sales side and I was saying, hey, Frank, I just, on my calendar, I wanted to let you know, here's a couple of vacation days that I'm looking at. And I'll never forget this response from him to me. And he said, came down, sat down with me and he said, Adam, I don't care if you book out the next 3 months for vacation. You can take out the next 6 months, whatever vacation days you want, whatever days you need to take off, those are yours. He says, I don't even want you to think about this job as trying to let me know when you're going to take vacation. He said, I'm here to help you close business. You work what days you want to do. You need to tell me how I can help you close business And that just set me on fire. They ended up selling, I think it was 3 years later, interestingly enough, to a company that Charles Munger, unfortunately, who just passed away recently, the partner of Warren Buffett. He was the president of the board at a little company that we had gotten acquired by. And it just put me in an interesting position. But that experience with Frank moving into the director of sales and marketing, and then working with Charlie Munger has changed my life. He just happened to be on this this little company that acquired us, and I got to sit at board meetings with Charlie Munger, and I learned from him in just a few board meetings, and then doing more research on his life, what it meant to build meaningful companies. And those principles that I learned from him, one of the things that he had just said to me that I'll never forget was, we're in this business because it's difficult. A lot of people don't get into this business. We were in case management software with governments. He said a lot of people don't want to get into this business because it's a difficult business, but that's where our opportunity is. And so when he looked at things as creating strong businesses, he says, when you see challenges and others don't want to take on those challenges, if you can create great companies, great processes, productivity around that, then you'll have a company that will be around forever. And so those kinds of things, those opportunities that were led to me through what you could look back at and say, man, I got blown up in 2001. I got blown up in 2008, but they led me to opportunities. So I look at that, those challenges created opportunities in my life I was able to take advantage of. And so I got to help move that acquisition from Frank Felice and the other owners there, that I had a great experience. That set the path for me. I realized that, and I told my wife, I said, I won't put us in jeopardy. I'm not going to go out and create another company, but what I'm going to do is it made me find my new lane, which was, how do I help business owners create more value? Because I learned very early on, running my own business for 4 to 5 years, you get good at something. There's a reason why business owners are finding success and they're still in business, living the American dream. But oftentimes what happens, I found this myself, you get tunnel vision. You get accustomed to seeing what you're used to, and it's hard to bring in other opinions because you think you're the expert in that. And one of the biggest warnings that I hear from a business owner, an entrepreneur, is, I've run out of mentors. I don't need any mentors. I know better than anybody else. It seems funny that every book is the exact opposite of that, but I've heard it so many times that it's always amazed me. And so when you stop learning, when you stop letting others give you guidance and feedback, or even just as a sounding board, I think you run into problems. But it's within that I've found opportunity. And I've been lucky to work with a lot of great owners that have allowed me to come in and show them a different perspective.
Well, speaking of mentors, I mean, what better mentor to have than Charlie Munger? I remember you sharing stories about being in board meetings and just, razzing them and playing and giving them a hard time and vice versa. And it was just really not only a educational experience, but really a comfortable, engaging experience. And it was,
it was funny. It was funny. I have to tell you this, when I first was preparing for our board meeting, and the Daily Journal Corporation is the company. It's such a unique, interesting company. If you're an investor, you should look at it. Really interesting company that had acquired this company from Logan. But when I was talking to the executive assistant of Charlie Munger, preparing for this board meeting with him, she said, I need to tell you 2 things. One, don't be offended if Charlie falls asleep during the board meeting and you're presenting. And 2, now keep in mind, at this time, I think he was about 87, 88, maybe close to 90 at the time. But she said, and the other thing is, if he goes off on a tangent, don't be alarmed, just let him go. And he did both of those things, actually. The first board meeting, I got up, I was really excited. I'd spent 2 weeks putting the data together. We're this newly acquired company under them for just, I think, maybe 9 months, a year. This is my first board meeting with him. And I look over at him. I'm so excited even to be in the same room. And I see him just kind of leaned over, eyes shut, knocked out, right? And then he wakes up mid my presentation, and then just starts, I wish I had a recorder in there. I'm sure I could go back and get the meeting notes, as it's a publicly traded company, but it was amazing. It was like every time he would just drop a nugget of just, things that impacted me greatly from his experience. Like I said, in building meaningful, long-lasting companies.
Well, I've been a fly on the wall watching your career, and as we've talked and you've shared these experiences and the lessons you've learned, and I think you need to write a book about it one of these days, Adam, because I think you could teach people a lot, teach those who are aspiring to do the same, both the mistakes you made, the lessons you've learned, the mentorship that you've received. I mean, the list goes on. You talked briefly, and we're coming up on our next break here, but you talked briefly about how when you hire people, you're looking for ownership. Correct me if I'm wrong, but another thing you've done that's proven to be an asset for you in these companies is you are not going out and hiring top sales professionals with big fat salaries, high expectations, et cetera. You're hiring young, hungry college kids, paying them a small salary or even just an hourly wage and bonuses. Hasn't that been a part of your success in the last couple of companies, at least the last two that you're building?
It really has. At the company in Logan, that I had started out at, government sales, it's a long sales cycle. And so you're talking a year to a year and a half. That means that you're really taking a risk when you bring somebody on that you don't know if they're going to be successful for a year or two in it. So you could be paying the base wages, benefits, and all of these things, and it doesn't work out. You're 2 years down the road and you're replacing them. And I realized that was a tough place to be, a high leverage risk for any company. And we still had success at it, but I tried to figure out a way to flip that, just as you had discussed. And so the next company that I went to, it was already set up that way, because this is a very small, less than $2 million a year company. And like many young companies trying to be successful, they were saying commission only, right? No base salary. They were hiring at commission only. And I'm looking at that the way that was set up, and I'm like, how do I leverage this? How do I get people to feel like they can be here for years and it's a real career for them?
I'm going to cut you off for just a couple of minutes here. We've got to go to our next and last break. We'll pick it up as soon as we come back. Don't go away. We're visiting with Adam Laing, the CEO of HCP. Be right back.
All right, good job, guys. I'll clear it back in a couple minutes.
Thank you, Matt. Sorry about that. I kind of asked you a big question right before we were supposed to.
No, that's good. I got to pay attention when it's showing down there below. But I can go through that pretty quick. But it is a big part of it, that entrepreneurial piece that where I've certainly found success.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying about ownership, right? You bring on guys who have an entrepreneurial mindset, an ownership mindset. They're hungry to succeed, and yet they usually don't have much experience, so they're not expecting a big, huge salary. And I think equally important, they're moldable, right? You don't have to retrain them, right? Break bad habits. I mean, I think that's one of the your secrets to success is taking on these young bucks who are an open canvas, right?
Yeah.
Canvas. And so I've done the same throughout my career, and I love taking on somebody who has no experience, but they're hungry.
Yeah. That's really what it is, that entrepreneurial spirit, that burning in the belly. I've always described it. Somebody that you just know is willing to get after it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
If they can learn, you can mold them, and they have that, you've got a great force to deal with.
Yeah, they either need to have even if they have sales experience, as long as they have that personality that is open and willing to learn, right? I mean, my favorite hire over the years was a guy named Josh Reagan. He was a sales manager at Valvoline, the Jiffy Lube type place. And I recruited him to come to a straight commission job at Leaf Guard. I told him, I can quadruple what you're making. I promise you, you've got what it takes. And he was humble enough to try, and he just blew it up. I mean, a year later, he was making $100,000 a year. He was leaving the next day on a second honeymoon to Cancun. They just bought a house. I mean, he was in tears as he thanked us for giving him the opportunity.
That's awesome.
Coming back, man.
You're listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back to Finding Certainty. We're visiting with my favorite guest, my younger brother, Adam Laing. Adam was a gift to our family. We lived in New Zealand when I was a young boy, and we ended up adopting Adam there as an infant. My sister Chai, our sister Chayera, was adopted from Korea. Adam was adopted from New Zealand. He's a combination of Samoan and Niuean and Chinese and a little bit of everything. You're kind of a melting pot. Maybe that's one of the reasons you're so talented. You have just a blend of nationalities. But as we were talking about mentors, isn't it interesting how the student becomes the teacher, right? The mentee becomes the mentor. And that's exactly what we both have gone through in our careers. You most definitely are in your career, because now you are mentoring and teaching and bringing on these young, hungry reps and turning them into sales professionals. We were talking over the break. If you watch the YouTube version, you get a little bit of the behind the scenes conversation, but we were talking about how this again is a secret to Adam's success. He brings on reps who are oftentimes new to sales. They're young, they're hungry, they're looking to make a place for themselves or a name for themselves, but they're very moldable. In the process, Adam can help them become who he wants them to be and who they need to be, who they should be as sales professionals. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things we've learned from one of our greatest mentors, our dad. But anything you wanted to add to that topic real quick before we move on?
The only thing I would add, for those that are listening and are entrepreneurial or they've got their own businesses, they're looking to grow it. I talked a little bit about coming from that stage of large six-figure salaries and trying to make it work. And you've got all this risk. And then, you get a year or two into it and maybe it doesn't work out. So it was fortuitous with the next company that I got recruited to come in, and they were doing commission only sales. They had a small sales force and they had to go kill it to eat. And I when I first got there, I said, okay, we've got to blend this back to the model of, we got to pay them more base salary. We got to do all these things. Well, at the time, I didn't want to come in and rock the boat, but it really took us to this place where I needed to find an entrepreneur. I needed to find somebody that was I can get up and get started. The burning in the belly, I'm willing to go after this. Maybe didn't have sales experience because we couldn't afford to do that. And so I negotiated with the owners of the company to give a very small base salary. It was like $24,000 a year, so that I could at least go and offer that up. Well, we stuck with that. We didn't change it. So I was there for 4.5 years. I got there, they were about a $2 million company. I left when they were a $10 million company. So their valuation was 13x. They ended up being merged with a large PE company, sold for 130 million 4.5 years later. But the secret to that success for me was finding that balance. Like I said, let me just tell you this. So we started out from no base salary to just a $24,000 base. I'm like, who can I go recruit? So we started at the college level. We were in a university town, and we went to young graduates that were either on the technical side, that were on the business, side, and they were moldable. We were able to take them in and said, if you are looking at building a business, I'm going to give you a base salary. It's not a lot, but it's not what you do if you were starting your own business. Then I'm going to give you 70% commission of everything you earn with this small base salary. 4.5 years later, we had, of our 20 reps or so, I think 12 of them averaged $170,000 salary. And so, we got this to a place where they were entrepreneurs. They looked at it as a small base salary. I don't know, I'm 2.5 years removed from that company. I don't know if they've even changed that. But at the company I'm at right now, I ran into the same issue with coming in early on. You've got guys that have been in the industry for a while, they're developed, they've got experience, but didn't necessarily have that entrepreneurial perspective. So that was a big learning thing for me. And you got to find the right balance of that. $24,000 base salary isn't the right thing for everybody, but somebody that is entrepreneurial and you help them to understand how they can get their upside with it and aligned with the company. When their interests are aligned with the company, that makes all the difference in the world. And I'll just tell you one last thing about the owners that I work with right now. They're the first really that I've worked with that in a small $10 million and less company that said, we want to do net profits. We want everybody to be vested. Let me tell you the difference that has made at our company. I've been here 2.5 years. We've almost doubled the revenue in 2.5 years from when I started. And a lot of it I put back to the owners that had a lot of foresight that said, as we benefit, I want every employee to benefit. That's a hard thing
Wow.
for owners to take on. And we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars putting that back in the pockets of our employees, but we've almost doubled our revenue in 2.5 years. We're on track to do that again, double our revenue in the next 2 years. And I look at their foresight with that and willingness to provide that. It's been a game changer.
That's fantastic. Well, and you touched on a point I think is really important. We don't have much time, but you talked about the multiplier. As you're building the valuation of these companies, it's not just the 13 million you grew it to. It's actually, in many cases, worth 10x, 20x, especially if they're looking at selling or being bought out. Can you explain that just in 60 seconds?
Yeah. So most of my career has been spent in SaaS, so software as a service. Those type of companies, right? When you're looking at subscription-based models, they have your highest multiples. I used to hear about Salesforce CRM was worth 17x, kind of at the peak. The company that I left got close to a 12 or a 13x in 2022 as far as their valuation. So the objective is really to create a business, get it to a point, and there's tiers that private equity companies look at, $5 to $10 million, $10 million and above. But depending on the efficiency, there's this thing called Rule 40. Tells you how you're doing from an EBITDA and a revenue growth perspective. I use that as my guide, and we can talk about that another time. It tells you how efficiently you're using your capital, and really where your growth is. And if you're on track with that, it's easy to say, but if you're on track with that, your valuation at the end of the day can be much larger than you think. Services-based companies are usually, around a 3 to 5x. But even still, you look at, how do I grow this? How do I hire the right people? And maybe not everybody wants an exit. That exit strategy may not be there for everybody. But if you're looking at that, that's really core principles that I look at. The last thing that I'll mention, I left the company that I was at, because they wouldn't offer me or the employees any kind of net profits. When I got there, it was $2 million in revenue. When I left, they were $10 million in 4.5 years, which took them from a valuation of about 16 to 18 million to 120 to 130 million. The owners wouldn't even consider a small percentage of vesting me and other employees at the time. And so I left and thankfully landed at a place that I'll forever be grateful for Brian and Eric at HCP, because they saw the vision of helping of the bigger piece of the pie by involving everybody. And they've benefited greatly. The employees have benefited greatly. And so I'm really grateful. The last thing I'll just mention as far as developing young talent is one of the guys that I had helped develop right out of college. Is now running another software company for me. They just did $1 million last year in emergency management. And it is because of that mindset, these same principles. So I've seen it to be able to duplicate this effort in many areas.
That's great. So we're running out of time here. The show goes fast, as I mentioned. As we look back on our lives, one of our greatest mentors, of course, has been our own father, John Laing. As I look at him and his example, the things that stand out for me are just how gregarious he is, how interested he is in the people he meets. I mean, he can remember people's names from that he met 50 years ago. He calls people all the time, randomly, around the world, across the country, from all of his travels, from past careers. He maintains relationships like nobody I've ever seen. Those are some of the lessons I've learned just in the last minute or two here. Adam, are there lessons you've learned from Dad that have impacted you as a leader and as a CEO?
Absolutely. I think about where I was adopted, your natural born son. You just think about this whole nature versus nurture. And I can tell you, we used to go around. In fact, you can see the difference of how Patrick and I look. But it would always crack me up. We would see people when my parents lived in Maryland, and they would say, "Man, you look just like your dad." They'd say that to me all the time. And I don't know if that's just, he had a darker complexion as well, but I'll never forget that. But who I am today, who Patrick is certainly such a huge impact from our father. Two things. One, neither of us are good at working with tools because our dad didn't pick up tools a lot. But what he did help us to do, and I mean physical tools like building stuff. We didn't learn how to, go out and fix cars and things, but we did learn how to build businesses. And I think seeing my father and my mom as an entrepreneur, the ability to communicate, the ability to persuasively provide opportunities for others. And I saw this in his church life. There was really little mix between personal life and church life. It was all kind of one envelope. But what I saw was care for people, how he felt about people. And just like Patrick said, we would hate it. We'd go to a grocery store and we'd be in there for a half hour because he'd run into two people. And that carried through. That's why he was successful in his entrepreneurial, in his career, and with people, everywhere that he met. And that's the biggest thing that I've picked up from him and actually from Patrick as well.
I appreciate that. And I agree. I believe part of being a mentor and building a team is being a servant leader. You have to be willing to serve them, to lift them up, to guide and direct them, to be that example. And that's exactly what Dad has been throughout his life, whether it was in his church career, when our parents started a franchise that they franchised all over the country, even overseas. And between being a servant leader and being one of the most consistent people I've ever seen, those are the things we've learned from our dad. So happy birthday, Dad. Adam, thank you for being on Finding Certainty. Finally. Appreciate you taking the time, my friend. And I'm glad we had a chance to talk. So you've been listening to Finding Certainty. I'm Patrick Laing, your host. We've been hearing from my brother, Adam Laing, CEO of Healthcare Compliance Pros. If your company is in need of help meeting the compliance concerns and issues out there, if you're in the health arena and you need that help, reach out to them. They have a software, a program that can make it much easier. And if you have questions, reach out to them. You can find them at the website's healthcarecompliancepros.com. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
All right. Thanks for being with us today. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
All right, perfect. Good job, guys. All clear.
Thank you, man.
You're welcome. Thank you. You both have a great weekend.
You too. Well, we're still recording. Anything we missed or anything you'd want to add?
The only thing that I would add, just kind of finishing up on that last thought about Dad and about how he made people feel every time they saw him. Didn't matter if it was 40 years in between. You could just see this love that he had for everybody. And I've adopted that
Still
into
does. Yeah, he's not dead.
still does, right? Still does. And I think the way that is reflected on me, I've worked for companies and owners that, hey, as long as you're with us, great, but almost like a trader mentality if they went somewhere else. Like you're never going to find anything as good as what you've got here. And I think the reflection that I've gotten from Dad is I look at every single person that crosses my path, whether personally or at my business, whatever it is. And maybe it goes back to that old scout motto that whenever you go to a campground, you always leave it better than when you got there. You learn those things early on. But with my employees, I feel like my job is to be here to develop you, to help you to become a better version of yourself professionally. If I can impact that personally, great. And so if that path means that you've got a better opportunity somewhere else, I'm going to help you get there. But
Mhm.
my job is to develop you, make you the best self, personal, professional self that you can be here. And then it's my job when you create value by me helping you to do that, to do my best to keep you here at the company, right? Those two factors has helped me to develop people that have a vested interest in what we're doing as a company. And I really look at that as aligning what their interests are and what the companies are. And when you can align those two things together, and they really know that as a person, I care about them. And if their best move is to go somewhere else, I'm going to be a reference for them. Right. I look at this as a great opportunity. And what I found is that, Dad used to call that casting your bread, and it will come back to you. And that's what I found. People have moved on. They found opportunities that I couldn't create for them, and I feel like blessed that they helped us to get to where we were while they were there. And I wish them all the luck wherever they're at. For that group of employees that have helped make an impact, have set that foundation, I do whatever I can to keep them where they're at so they feel valued. And then they're aligned, invested with what the company principles are. That comes from a reflection of Dad.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's my favorite thing about building the company we are. It's one, the quality of the people we're attracting, but two, me helping groom them, helping them become more of who they are, right? I see people come to our team that have so much potential, and oftentimes it's untapped, right? They've just started to channel it, or they've just started to unwrap it. I view it kind of like an artichoke, and we're peeling back the leaves of the artichoke. And the leaves are good in an artichoke if you're an artichoke fan, but they're not as good as the heart. And so we're constantly peeling back those layers of the onion or the layers of the artichoke, getting to that heart and getting to that person who they can be. And and it's really gratifying. I really enjoy that part of our business. And I also realize that we could do more as a business and just make income. We could actually make a difference. And so we realized that we could use our expertise to help nonprofits raise funding. And now we do that. We help any church or school or sports team or foundation. We can help them raise unlimited, zero cost funding. And do you know that when we added that into our repertoire about a year ago, seemed to change the whole makeup of our company. And it was like when we incorporated that servant mindset, that service orientation, it just took our company to a whole nother level. And I attribute that to Dad. I mean, that's where I learned it from, both Mom and Dad, right? They're both incredible servants. They serve everyone around them. And I'm grateful that we had those examples in our life.
Me too. And I think successful entrepreneurship, business management comes down to what you just said, a vision. that's a vision that was created in our household. It's impacted us personally. It's impacted us in the way that we do business. Life is too short to just look at doing the grind and from a monetary standpoint, but to be able to be successful in that area and to build people for the long term. Again, they might be passing through for a short period of time, but to know that you can have an impact on somebody, on their self-worth, their self-valuation, which again, it's a self-serving principle, because then they make a bigger impact to the company. But it is a true principle that I definitely have gleaned from our parents, and it to me, it's a critical part of setting a vision and a foundation for your employees and for your staff. I know you guys do that at Certainty. I know it's impacted you guys even in the projects and the work that you guys pick up and you do, because it is such a holistic, organic perspective, the way that you guys have bundled together your offerings and your services. And there really is, I mean, you can put all that together, but without the vision for an understanding, number one, you're not impactful. You're not impactful in the industry. If you can't align that together with your offerings and services, we often talk about product market fit. You have to be successful, you've got to match your opportunity, your valuation of what are we providing our customers, and then that market fit is so critical. I look at that just as important on the employee side, which Certainty has certainly done, which is match that vision. What are we offering as far as to our customers? What's the impact that is from an organic perspective with our vision? And then when you get people aligning that vision and understanding, that's where you get pay dirt, right? That's where those things come together,
Right.
because there's a belief system in what we're doing. We're not just selling widgets. And to me, when you get that alignment, amazing things can happen for your staff and employees. And so I know you guys have a big business owner mindset as well. I know that's why you guys are finding the success that you guys are going through. It's the same thing with me and the companies that we're working with as well.
Well, all I know is this, that when you come to a company, it's the best hire they ever made. So
Well,
it
I
doesn't take
definitely
them long to figure that out.
Well, it's been fun. I'm glad. I'm sorry I've given you such a hard time about moving this this opportunity to chat with you and talk with you, but no better time than to talk about our father and his belated birthday from yesterday, and really the roots of where we've come from and why we're at where we're at, right? All a part of that beautiful tapestry.
Yeah, I think the timing was just right. So if you're watching this, Dad, happy birthday. We love you.
Happy birthday, Papa.
Thanks for being on. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy, so I haven't been too upset that it took us this long. I just knew we'd do it eventually.
They always save the best for last. I guess I'm the first of the year, so we're starting off the year. But no, I've really appreciated having a tribute for Dad and how he's impacted our lives has been awesome. So thanks for putting this together, and thanks for inviting me.
You bet. Hey, I was going to do a shout out to Kaimani.
Oh, yeah.
Son is serving a mission for our church in Portland, Oregon, 2-year mission. It's interesting because, like father, like son, we didn't think you were going to go on a mission. You were a bit of a rebel at that age, and Kaimani, he wasn't so sure he wanted to go out and serve. And yet through miracle of miracles, you both made it. And I have to say, I've never seen someone change so fundamentally through that 2 years of service than I saw you. And I know it changed your entire life. And I just read this long email from Kaimani, where he shared several experiences he's had, people he's working with, and just miraculous experiences and events that are taking place. And I bawled all the way through it. It was really special hearing how he's doing. I'm so grateful he's having that experience.
It's pretty awesome. It's surreal, certainly. You say you haven't seen somebody change as much. Well, let me tell you, when you have the record in American Fork for the longest police chase before getting, before crashing 2 cop cars and crashing your sister's car as a juvenile, it's not hard to do a 180 from that to the latter years, 15 years old and joyriding, thinking that was the best thing in life. But it just, for me, having those kinds of experiences as a young 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, and then being able to look at, you were a big part of that. I remember playing basketball out in the backyard. My hair was down to the middle of my back, just like Kaimani's was before he left. And you just sat me down, and said, "What are you doing with your life? What are you doing?" Well, I didn't listen to you. Nothing changed that day, but over time, over the next coming years, I had a lot of making up to do. And those were the early days, but I'll tell you, for me, it was life-saving mission, literally, to go out and to serve somebody else, to realize how small my perspective on the world was. And I know Kaimani is experiencing that. To put others before himself has been amazing to see the change in his life that he's going through, and I experienced the same thing. So I joke about it now, but that was mom and dad's favorite thing to do, is to talk about me and all my rebellious juvenile years before changing. In fact, when my kids were like 8, 9, 10, they were telling my kids, "Did you know your dad did this?" And so my kids have held that against me ever since. So thankfully, all
Yeah.
that's been expunged now, but it does tell you a story that it doesn't matter who you are, where you're at, from professional, personal, where you're at in life, man, things can change on a dime. It's just putting yourself in the right position, having the right people around that love and support you. I just heard
Absolutely.
this thing that you become the average of the 5 people that you're around the most. And
Mhm.
that's meant a lot for me. It's meant a lot for mentoring with my own children, and even from a professional standpoint, what you can glean from others.
Well, most people who serve any sort of mission, whether it's 2 weeks in Africa with your Baptist church, or 2 years overseas as an LDS missionary, or whatever the case might be, most will come back and say it was the best experience of their life. And you hit the nail on the head, Adam. I believe it's because for the first time, many times, we're focused on everything but ourselves, and it's life changing. Anyway, we could go on and on, but we'll cut this short. I know you need to get back to work. I need to get back to bed. I've been really sick. You probably hear it in my voice, but I got showered and dressed up just so we could do the call today. And thankfully, my voice held out. A little bit gruffer than usual. I sound a little bit like Wolfman Jack, uh, but that's okay. I even have the beard to match. So,
That's right.
well, thanks,
Hey, well, I
brother.
hope you feel better. Thanks for having me on again. It's been a blast chatting with you and catching up. So hope you feel better, and thanks for having me.
You too, bud. Love
All
you,
right,
brother.
we'll see you. All right, love you too. We'll see you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.